Years ago, my brother Eddie got me into listing, what they now call ranking. Top 10, top 100, top of any old thing you'd care to list. Movies, books, you name it. And it was fun. It also turned out to be addicting. Oh, not as bad as smoking. But that desire, that yearning to number things still lingers. And it's the devil's own dance. Because every so often that monkey pops out of the inkwell behind my eyes, and that's when I take keyboard in hand, and 4 hours later I'm wondering where the time went. And at my age, I can't afford to misplace it. When making a movie list, for example, I find that I'm subject to a whole series of conflicting emotions, with sentimental favorites duking it out with cinematic masterpieces. My list of the top 100 movies of the 80s is a list I've rewritten many times, but Local Hero always seems to grab the top spot. It's not Raging Bull, which, despite its brilliance, is no day at the beach. It's not a box office blockbuster like E.T., which strangely wore out its welcome rather quickly. Nor is it a patriotic anthem like The Right Stuff, which caused one presidential candidate to abort the mission. Nor is it as funny or as warm or as touching as My Favorite Year, which is shtick raised to a high art thanks to a clever script, fine performances, and a magnificent Peter O'Toole. All great movies. So why does this 1983 British comedy top my favorite 80s list? Because it's magic. Both the movie and The Village of Furness weave a dreamlike spell that's very comforting and difficult to shake, as corporate dealmaker Peter Rickard comes to find out. Rickard plays a young executive who works for the Texas-based Knox Oil and Gas, and right away we get that he's really not such a nice guy. He's the quintessential 80s upwardly mobile yuppie. He's ambitious and successful and has all the toys, the Porsche, the plush digs, but his life is hollow. And he resents the idea that he's being sent to Scotland so that Knox Oil can build a refinery there. He'd rather just close the whole deal with a phone call. Burt Lancaster plays Felix Happer, the head of Knox Oil, which has family roots in Scotland. And Burt Lancaster is just great. There are some actors who, even when they're not that good, are still kind of great. That's not a problem here, as Burt is both good and great. He's as big and as broad and as funny as ever. He uses it to define his character's eccentricities. His character also happens to be a serious amateur astronomer who has his own planetarium, and Bert is expecting good things to be happening in the night skies over Scotland, and he wants reports. So Mr. McIntyre goes to Scotland where he meets a future Doctor Who. Peter Capaldi plays Danny, Knox's man in Scotland, and together they set off for the village of Furness. And the magic starts to weave its spell as a thick Scottish mist descends upon the road, and they're both forced to sleep overnight in their car. The mist is, of course, a metaphoric gateway. The next morning, when they wake up and drive into the seaport village of Furness, it's a far cry from the glass and steel skyline of Houston, Texas. And it's here that we get our first few glimpses of the magic phone booth. It's just part of the background and not particularly noticeable except for its color. But it's the only phone booth in the village. It's the line connecting both worlds. But Mac is a telex and fax man, neither of which are available. So Mac dutifully calls Bert back in Houston to inform him of their progress, and also to tell him about what's going on in the night skies, because as we know, Bert wants reports. Mac teams up with Gordon, the hotel owner, played by Dennis Lawson, and together they feel out the villagers about selling their property. It turns out the villagers are all too happy about selling their property, but being Scottish, they're naturally canny about money. And the villagers speculate endlessly about what they'll buy with their newfound fortune. But what they don't realize is what will eventually happen when they do sell. A way of life will be gone forever. Even Mac is starting to have second thoughts, but he's got a job to do, and he's determined to close the deal. But there is one holdout. A descendant of the Knox family, a man named Ben Knox, actually lives in a hut on the beach. It also turns out that he owns the beach and doesn't want to sell. Meanwhile, Danny meets and falls in love with Marina, a marine biologist with webbed toes, who mistakenly thinks Knox Oil wants to build a research center in the village. Meanwhile, Mac and Gordon are trying to get Ben to sell his beach property as the villagers are getting a little chaffed about his refusal to do so. Time to call in the big guns. One star-filled night, a comet seems to streak across the sky. As it draws closer, we see it's the headlights of a helicopter. The helicopter lands on the beach, and Burt Lancaster emerges from the helicopter like a god stepping out of his chariot. It's pure magic. Burt takes over the negotiations and decides to scuttle the plans for the oil refinery and instead open an astronomical research facility. To Mac's surprise and irritation, Danny chimes in and convinces Burt to also create Marina's research facility. They can call it the Happer Institute. Burt likes it, and so does Marina, and it looks like Danny's got himself a girlfriend. So Mac is sent back home to Houston to take care of the paperwork. Once there, however, he's standing in his empty apartment listening to the night sounds of the city, the hum of endless traffic, and sirens wailing in the distance. And back in Scotland, in the phone booth, the phone starts to ring. Funny thing about that phone booth. When I was gathering photos for this episode, I came across an article about how that phone booth was in danger of being destroyed, but a protest movement saved it. Looks like a lot of people love this movie. And they love the magic that phone booth represents, a rebirth. And that's not too dissimilar how the people in my village feel about the Hollywood sign. Both were saved for their magic. As for all this listing and ranking business, he made me do it. See you around the campus.